Well, that's not how I would have done it. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Worlds collide when the Flash uses his superpowers to travel back in time to change the events of the past. In the process, he inadvertently alters the future, and he becomes trapped in an alternate reality where he must enlist the help of a very different Batman and Kryptonian than he is used to. If I could describe this movie with one word, without a doubt it would be chaotic. It very much looks and feels like a movie that's been stitched together over a several year period. And because of that, for me, this was a mostly frustrating experience.
Why do these things always happen to me?
And not just because of what actually happens in the movie, but also because of all of the missed opportunities that came along with this failure. Missed opportunities with the character of Flash, missed opportunities with most of the characters in this movie, and a missed opportunity when you look at this movie as an underwhelming reimagining of the Flashpoint storyline. And no, this is not Flashpoint in a traditional sense, although I do feel like it's trying to be, but in reality it lacks any of the emotional depth or any of the high-stakes consequences that made that original story so iconic.
No, don't like that.
In fact, it very much feels like a cheap imitation of that story. Let me put it this way, the CW Flash handled this story better, even with all the alterations it made. And that was an underwhelming adaptation of this story also. With the impending reset or reboot of DC on film, a Flashpoint story would be ideal to make that a possibility.
That makes sense.
So this movie on the surface is seemingly coming at the perfect time. But when it's all said and done, much to my surprise, it felt more like a soft reboot more than anything. And to me, it was done in the most frustrating way possible. Rather than giving what came before a proper send-off and potentially pleasing everyone in the process, it seems like the filmmakers of this movie were content picking and choosing what aspects of the previous DCEU would continue, and what aspects of the previous DCEU they would erase. Which is sure to cause division amongst an already fractured fan base.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
Let me be very clear, this movie is in no way a continuation or a farewell to the Snyderverse. In fact, to me, it was very obviously a continuation of the Justice League version of these characters, which was very obvious to me early in the film and was an instant red flag. Imagine doubling down on your terrible decision making. That's WB in a nutshell, I guess. What I know is that the last time we saw the character of the Flash was in the Snyder Cut, and in the end of that film, the character realizes his true potential when he saves everyone and everything by traveling back in time. And that moment, for my money, is the greatest Flash moment ever put on film in his relatively limited screen time.
I like it a lot.
But to me, it was a great representation of who the character of Barry Allen is. But in The Flash, in this movie, it feels like they almost immediately undo that character development and kind of returns the character to his errand boy roots that he had in the Justice League. They make it very clear that the Flash is once again the whipping boy of the Justice League, the butt of the jokes and not to be taken seriously.
Me, right?
In addition to the Flash, Batfleck very much feels like he is returning to one of the worst interpretations of the character in existence that we saw in the Justice League. To me, he didn't look right, he didn't sound right, and I was half expecting him to return to his something is definitely bleeding style of dialogue. Oh, and if you need any more proof that this is a continuation of Joss Whedon's Justice League, they actually reused the Lasso of Truth joke in the first 10 minutes of this film. So needless to say, it didn't take long for me to realize what kind of experience I was in for.
I can see this is going to be a long night, convict.
I would like to say at the very least, Barry's story of inner turmoil about the decisions he makes throughout the film hit home with me emotionally. But I can't say that either because to me this felt like the Cliff Notes version of that story, which is unfortunate. Because this is a story that could have and should have packed a serious emotional punch. I also need to point out that if we take away all of the behind-the-scenes Ezra Miller drama,
Talk to you soon, okay? Bye!
I actually do think that he is talented enough to be involved in a Flash story that does the character justice. Unfortunately, he's just in a movie that doesn't really give him a lot to work with, although he does do the best with what he's given. I also need to bring up how this film uses CGI. There was a time when CGI was used as a tool to enhance a story, and the original Jurassic Park comes to mind as a good example of that.
Life, finds a way.
But as it stands right now, the technology is dominating modern day films, most notably comic book movies. And if you are going to rely so heavily on CGI, you best put in the time and effort to make it look as good as it possibly can. The Flash relies heavily on CGI, and to the surprise of no one, it's not particularly done well. It still amazes me that a movie like Man of Steel has better CGI than a movie that is made in 2023.
Not impressed.
It's also ironic considering this movie borrows heavily from Man of Steel. More often than not, the CGI just looks awkward and out of place, and usually just took me out of the movie. There was one moment in particular where CGI was used that it actually rivaled Thor Love and Thunder and the floating head sequence. And that's not the type of thing you want to be compared to if your goal was to create impressive visuals.
What the hell am I looking at? When does this happen in the movie?
I need to talk about the humor for a moment because that's kind of been a sore spot for me, especially when it comes to comic book movies. And while humor has always been a part of Ezra's version of The Flash, and I guess he is made to be intentionally obnoxious, I still found it to be mostly unbearable due to the lowbrow nature of most of the jokes. I know a lot of people say that James Gunn had nothing to do with this movie, and that might be true, but I'm starting to doubt it now that I've actually seen it. We know for a fact that changes were made very late in the post-production process, and if I'm being honest, a lot of the humor in this movie feels like it was either suggested by James Gunn or intended to imitate his style of humor in some way. Shit and dick jokes are once again in abundance, and it makes the characters who say them look just as ridiculous as the filmmakers were apparently intending.
Ha ha, very funny, motherfucker.
I'm sure some people will enjoy this type of shit, but I'm just not one of those people who needs to hear superheroes talking like this. It's not flattering, it's not charming, in fact, it comes off as very juvenile. And I just prefer my superheroes to be taken just a little bit more seriously. As for the elephant in the room, that being the return of Michael Keaton. As a longtime fan of the character, I should not have been as underwhelmed as I was seeing him for the first time in a long time on film. You see, they want him to feel like a big deal just by his mere presence, and they think they can show you the suit, and they can show you the vehicles, and have him say a couple of callback lines and everyone's going to be happy.
Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
Now, a lot of people may be satisfied by something like that. I'm not. I refuse to get sucked in by more cheap nostalgia bait. This was an opportunity for them to give this iconic version of the character the closure that he never received in his own films. And if I'm being honest, his existence in The Flash is nothing more than a glorified cameo. In fact, when they first introduce him in the movie, and the way he was introduced, it had the Jake Skywalker treatment written all over it. I will admit he does get better as the film goes on, and he does have a handful of badass moments, but his inclusion is ultimately pointless. And to me, Michael Keaton's Batman just deserves better than that. Which brings me to the Easter eggs, cameos, and references, to which there is an abundance of in this film. And honestly, before I watched this, I thought I would be comparing these moments to the MCU. But at least the MCU Easter eggs typically lead to something, even if it's something I don't care about. But the Easter eggs and references in The Flash serve no greater purpose other than to inspire some cheap feelings of nostalgia. It's WB going through their greatest hits, one shallow reference at a time.
Whoop-de-doo! What does it all mean, Basil?
When Michael Shannon talked about multiverse movies feeling like someone playing with action figures, this is the type of thing he was talking about. Because in the grand scheme of things, nothing really matters in this movie. By the end of it, we come to the conclusion that everything we just witnessed was pretty much a waste of our time. And the inevitable conclusion to this story was always going to be exactly what it ended up being. And honestly, the whole experience just made WB and DC feel directionless. It makes the Flash movie feel like wasted potential, because he is capable of so much more. And what you are left with is a movie that is as chaotic as the company that produces it is behind the scenes.
If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
I can't say that I didn't feel anything while watching this movie, because what I actually felt more than anything was frustration. I was frustrated that a lot of talented people who worked on this movie were underutilized. I was frustrated at how some of these characters were handled, and I was frustrated at what they are turning the DC universe into. And because of that, there are very few things about this movie that I found to be redeemable, and that's why I'm going to give it the Angry Rocky.
The dreaded stinks! Y'all be cool. Right on.